Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev and the entire Russian government are resigning. This follows President Putin's State of the Nation address just moments ago. And now for the latest, let me bring in our correspondent Lucy Taylor from Moscow. She's joining us on the line. Hello there, Lucy. Do we know what led to the resignation at this point?
Well, this has just happened, and to say it's surprising, I think, is an understatement. What seems to have led to it is this speech that we had from the President Vladimir Putin earlier today, a few hours ago. It was his annual State of the Nation address, which in itself is a very significant event here in Russia. And he used it mostly to speak about domestic policy issues, but at the end he sprung this first surprise, which was that he himself was proposing constitutional changes to a number of different elements of the Russian constitution. In a nutshell, it was things like shifting power from the president to the parliament and the prime minister, and also restricting presidential term limits, which was seen as a way to change what comes after him. It seemed to pave the way for what comes next for him. He's in his final presidential term at the moment, according to the current constitution, but this seems to be a way possibly for him to stay on perhaps in a different role as prime minister, but with expanded powers, for example. And that was as far as it went. He then mentioned that this would have to go to the people, that the people should vote in a national referendum. There was no indication at that point that this was going to mean a very sweeping change on the same day. But then in the last few minutes, we've heard from the Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev that he and the rest of the government were standing down. So everybody here in Moscow trying to work out what this means, what's going to happen from now. It obviously has an effect on a number of things across the country, not least markets and things like that, as well as the day-to-day politics and what happens from now. But very surprising, possibly unprecedented, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens next in this big development.
Of course, and now President Putin has accepted their resignation and are asking the ministers to continue to function as caretaker government. Is there a timetable for that?
Well, I think it's too early to say what that timetable might be. He himself is in quite a rush to get on with other reforms to the country. As he was saying in his speech earlier, he actually said he'd moved forward his presidential address today because there's so much to be done in the country, big key national programs that he wants to implement to make lives better for the people, is what he was saying. But this does come at a time of some discontent in Russia. There were big protests last summer about the quality of life for Russians, slow economic growth in the country, high poverty rates. Putin himself has fairly low, historically low popularity ratings at the moment, and he's been struggling with that for most of the last year. So there is indeed a lot to be getting on with, and it's difficult to see how that's possible without the government. But it seems that now a new government will in time be appointed, and they will then be the ones who work out the way forward. What the current government and the Prime Minister who just resigned said is that they want to give the President the room to implement the changes that he's suggesting, but it does seem like there might be more to this that we'll have to work out in the coming days about what's going to happen next and what all this might mean for the politics of Russia.